Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I am your host, Tay Tayari, and today's guest is Angell Deer. In this episode, we tenderly traverse the invaluable qualities that can only be forged from life's trials and tribulations. We probe the possibility of our wounds as potent catalysts for self and other discovery, and we contemplate the shift that occurs from welcoming life's uncertainties while acknowledging the sacredness of the unknown. Furthermore, we reflect on the transformative power of imperfect authenticity, original wisdom, serving life and the land, and embracing a more inclusive approach to healing. Angell Deer is a medicine man, teacher, permaculturalist, beekeeper, international speaker, and lover of all forms of life. Drawing from Andean cosmology and Norse shamanism, he weaves ancient wisdom into modern narratives. As a veterinarian, healer, and spiritual guide, Angell tends to both land and soul, fostering deep connections and advocating for the preservation of bees and pollinators. His journey has taken him from international stages to the serene landscapes of the Sanctuary, a shamanic healing center nestled in Callicoon, New York State. There, amidst the sacred white deer's embrace, the land serves as a safe haven for animals, plants, bees, and people. If you are curious about any of my other offerings, such as the personalized threshold counseling that I provide for individuals and couples, or if you'd like to explore my latest essays, simply visit coyotecouncil.earth. You'll find a direct link in the show notes. Additionally, we extend an invitation for you to join our monthly newsletter, where we share updates on new podcast episodes and other creative happenings. You can easily join on our website. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform. Your likes, comments, ratings, and shares also play a vital role in supporting the organic growth of these heartfelt conversations and stories. Now, let's go beyond the known and embrace the mysteries of wholeness together with our dear guest, Angell Deer. One thing I came across on your website was a blog that you wrote, and it was titled, "The More Human You Are, the More Divine You Are." And I thought that something you said in there would be a good place for us to start. So I want to share a quote from that blog and then get into the topic with you. You say that teachers, healers, and guides are not the custodians of eternal sunshine. They are not separated from life's stormy weather. In fact, the ones who taught me the most gained my most profound respect and supported the unleashing of my becoming have had some of the most tragic and demanding lives. They never pretended to hold all the answers, nor aimed to embody any kind of perfection. Their commitment is to authenticity, not perfection. I think that's so well said, and I think it's a really deep topic, that there's a lot there. And I wonder how that you writing that at the time that you did, and now, if there's a difference in the way you perceive it, and maybe even further than that, how has this particular story, prayer, this living dialogue within you changed over time? This understanding of the healer carrying the wounds, and that is actually a source of the gold in which they're able to offer to the world.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, it hasn't changed. I think it keeps deepening, right? You know, there are so many layers to that topics, but I think one of the layer that seems very obvious to me because I witness it and I experience it also for my own life, is that because of the age of social media, digital media, and very quick superficial connection through that kind of media, it's powerful. I use it, but it doesn't provide the depth that traditional teachings are asking us to really connect to. Very often we start thinking that we know someone or we know their story, right? Because they're sharing part of their story. And in fact, all of that is curated a certain way. And it can be curated intentionally to give a certain image, right? But it's also curated just because of the restriction of the format, right? So it's a little bit like if you go read about the oak tree online, and you can read a lot of fact, a lot of science, a lot of spiritual teaching from the Celts and the others, right? But you're never going to have a depth of understanding. In fact, any kind of understanding, I believe, really about that being until you sit with it, until you spend 4 seasons with it, until you pray with it, until you make offering to it, until you go into deep silence, which is deep listening. And you might think you know the oak tree, but you don't really know it. And I'm picking up the oak tree because it's been one of those trees that I've been doing dieta with and sitting more and more over the past years. And I realize, well, I would probably never know that tree.
Right.
And then it comes to, we can reflect that on any part of the cosmos, on any part of the land, any part of the people. It's pretty clear, let's start where we should always start and probably end, which is the self. How much do I know myself? How much, clarity do I have? I have awfully better understanding today than I had 10 or 15 years ago. But I think as the understanding deepen about my own trauma, pain, desire, dreams, I also discover more and more unknown spaces. So as much as I want to know, I am forced into an expansion of the not knowing. So let's assume, I don't really know myself, and I like always to stay there, like I'm a mystery, I'm unknown yet, I'm to be discovered. How can I pretend at any moment in my life to know anyone? And that includes my wife, that includes my cat, that includes my teachers, right? Even if I spend a lot of time with them, I'm going to know more facets, right? And I think we're in a world that is always looking for resolution, for certainty. That's the mind, that's the ego, right? Is this black or is this white? Is it good or is this bad? And I like to see life more as a rainbow, and people more as rainbows too. It's not that easy to frame someone, right? Adding to that, you have the layers of the self-awakening, the discovery of the self, right? Where the true self kind of arises in that. And in my experience, it is always to the wounded part of the self. And it's also what mystics are saying for thousands of years in every tradition, that it is in the shadow. But shadow, when I say shadow, people would think the bad, right? Let's say the unseen, the things that are unresolved, that the self truly emerge, that the calls come from, that the quest is going to arise from. And indeed, people that have had the deepest quest, the most biggest struggle, very often are the ones that carry the most wisdom because of that, because they've had to sit with the unknown a lot. So the capacity to not only know the unknown, but more be comfortable with it, be with the unresolved, kind of the hopelessness of the self-discovery. There's an hopelessness to it. I don't think we ever get there. Maybe when we die and we pass through that door, maybe we have an understanding there. But I don't think with our limited consciousness as a human being, we can see that. And we're not here for that. We're here for the human experience. We're not here for the transcendence. It will come. It has come before, right? So my teachers which are, many South American, Peruvian teachers, and also Native Americans here, elders that I work with. Most people know them through, let's say, podcasts or conferences or retreats, right? But I've spent a lot of private time with them too. And over time, over 10, 20, 30 years, I start knowing a little bit about their past and their life, and also their daily struggle, which can be very different from the image that you see out there. Because they are stepping up in the capacity of teaching. So they might share some of their struggles, right? But they still have to deal with the pain, the sorrow, the losses, the grief, the unresolved. And there is a way that I think elders carry that in a way that is not egotistic, because there's also, and that's another facet of it, making the wound the ego. Like talking a lot about our pain and that, but in a way to be seen, right? In a way it's like, I suffered a lot, so, I know what I'm talking about. So we need to be careful, on how that might play in our psyche and in our teachings. So yeah, authenticity require, I guess, to be quite honest with all what's going on. But to finish with that, I think there's also, because there's less and less privacy about people, accept that some part of the self are never shared with the greater public. And it's not because of shame, it's not because of hiding in. I think the biggest wound are often the most sacred, and the most sacred things I don't think are here to be shared on internet or everywhere, right? They are shared in very small, intimate circles that can hold that. So, we have to navigate all those terrains, right? Wow. I know for myself, as my audience has grown and we get tens of thousands of people, that gets through me through social media and YouTube and podcast and newsletter, that people, I think, very easily quickly think, oh, this is Angell Deer, and I like him because of that, or I love him because of them, or I hate him because of that, right? People are going to have a lot of opinion, but it's your Angell Deer. Because if I ask someone else, they see someone else, right? So you don't know Angell, your Angell, your version of me, right? Like I'll never know you, brother, right? I could spend a lot of time with you and get to know you, but I need to stay in a place in my heart when I accept and welcome what I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Or what things in your character might seem so out of character, instead of shutting down and judging you and pushing you out, say, no, hey, my brother is human. And what is it that I didn't know? Because if I probably just love you because I read your post, I probably don't love you. Or just hate you because, right? I probably don't hate you, right? I made a very quick judgment call on you. And life is more complex,
Yeah.
It's really important to stay open, because I think very often we try to craft these characters about ourselves and each other's, and we don't give people space for being in their entirety, in their fullness. And that's, I think, problematic, right?
Yeah, definitely. Man, there's so much in that. Thank you for laying that out in the way that you did. And yeah, just showing how that topic goes so deep and it spreads so far, and it's so important. You reminded me when you were talking about how there's parts of the self that really, you're kind of saying like almost should just remain within the self, like that we carry some secrets that are really important and they're just for us. It reminded me of John O'Donohue. I think in his book Anamkara, he talks about, for a moment, he says the sacred and the secret are sisters. And at that point in the book, he's talking about how important it is to remember that you're not here to share, to bear everything within, that there's parts of the journey and the quest toward the true self, that, and toward the soul's path, that are important to hold within and to be within. You also reminded me too how there's this the importance of don't know mind in cultivating real intimacy with the immediate moment, that the don't know mind allows immediacy. It invites in the imminence of the moment. Whereas when we are attached to this knowing mind, or the mind that wants to know, that it does begin to narrow the perception of the moment, the experience of the moment. It begins to cut it up, categorize, box it in. Whereas the don't know mind is more like this vast sea of awareness and potentiality, which is more honest about the complexities you're speaking to that are inherent in any moment. I'm reminded of a brief story I want to share it. I think you'll appreciate it. I'm forgetting his name. It happened in like the 20th century at some point. And it was this PhD student. And he thinks that he had found one of the oldest living trees in America, I believe. And so he wanted to really prove this. And people were doubting him. And one day he decided, I'm going to figure this out. And the technology was crude at the time. And obviously the awareness was very crude, as you'll see. And he took out all these instruments out to the tree, and he prepares and he sets out and he cuts this tree down in order to get to the inside of it, to count the rings, to prove for his PhD thesis how old the tree was, that it was actually one of the oldest trees in America. And it's that knowing mind, the desiring mind to know things, to prove things, the ego-driven way of needing to be right, to needing to be seen as this one who knows, and how deeply rooted science is in that approach. Traditional science, I guess, not natural science, but you know what I mean. So I'm curious if anything comes up for you around that. I have other places to go, but I want.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the exact paradox and quest that the world is in. It's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We are on this frenetic train that is about knowledge, and we know probably more today than any time in humanity in many ways, because of the access to the internet, and literally you can know about any topic and probably learn about anything going online and searching for it. And it's a desire for knowledge, right? We want to know how old the tree is. But ancient wisdom is not about knowledge, about wisdom. And what's the difference? The wisdom here would have said, don't cut the tree. It's the oldest tree. That's wisdom. Wisdom is to know, that there are questions that cannot be answered or should not be answered or are not for us to know and answering. So very often my teacher always say, well, the difference is that wisdom is embodied knowledge, meaning it's not here, it's here, it's down there, it's in the body, right? That's the wisdom of knowing, right? And as we learn these ancient ways, and in my tradition, it's all about the not knowing, and that ancient wisdom is the great mystery. We don't fully know, but it's not a problem, right? So we rather dwell with an unanswered question, a little bit about what you were sharing about, than having an answer, because the answer is already restrictive, right? If I say, well, I don't know, this cup of coffee here is white, right? If you ask me the color and say, well, this is white, right? Like my t-shirt here. Then there's no other possibilities, right? Where if I sit with it, I might probably compare the two whites and pretty sure it's not the same white, right? So it's not really white. When I say white, I've already defined very restrictive, right? There's a grade of whites, there is gradients, right? There's differences. But immediacy and wanting to know might get me to an answer, but that answer, or I stop the questioning. Once you have an answer, you don't question anymore. Right? Ancient wisdom is telling us there is more to it that the eye can see. There is more to it than the mind can understand. there are other ways to get to know the world, which is through the body, through the spirit, through a deeper connection, that in fact is not going to give you knowledge, but wisdom. It's going to give you bigger questions, different questions. And I try as much as I can with my students to turn them towards that. I'm not going to give you answers really, but I might help you reframe the question or open the question. I think if I do that, I do a good job as a teacher. I can't really give you an answer because also my answer is just mine. It's not yours, right? And then it's knowledge, right? It's another page in your brain. And many people learn, I think, spirituality and ancient wisdom that way because it's not fully practiced. Like for me, the most difficult part of those teachings is the teaching about the land and the earth, which is the primary teaching. But there is so little I can communicate until you are a land caretaker. I cannot put into words what this relationship is to me.
Right.
All right. I can say, yeah, I love the land or I care for the land. And so I think the greater, bigger things that we are really looking for, which are purpose, which are meaning, those are not in the domain of knowledge, they're in the domain of wisdom. And the domain of wisdom is the unanswered question. And can I sit with that? Can I be really comfortable with it? Yeah. Not just saying, from the mind, oh yeah, I don't know anything, we don't know anything, and nobody knows anything. It's not like nihilist type of perspective.
Yeah.
Because knowing and not knowing is two different kind of knowing. Not knowing is a type of knowing. It's not the absence of knowing, it's a different kind of knowing, right? And that's where wisdom is. That's where the ancient path is. That's where the mystic dwells. That's where the exploration about the self needs to go into. And in a society that tells us everything needs to be resolved, everything needs to be known, we need to know all these attributes, somehow it's important, which we can really question why is that we want to know all the tree is. And if it's the oldest one, sit for it for a minute and you will see it's ego, right? I discovered it. I know it's the oldest tree, but there's no seeing of the tree. It's a very human-centric view of the world. And usually that doesn't go very well, right? In the case of that tree, it died, right? It got cut because of the incapacity to sit for a moment with it. We do that a lot. I do that sometimes too, right? It's not like we were immune to it, but we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. I think, like you're talking about, you can't really put into words what it would be like to describe what it means to be enmeshed in a particular locale, a particular ecology, and to be living with, creating a living with an ecology, with the land. And I really see that. I agree with you. And I see that path of going back to, of turning to the land, turning to a real relational matrix with the more than human kin that surround us as being the antidote to that non-seeing, or the very murky seeing that allows someone to cut down a really ancient tree in that way. That is a symptom of this real painful fracturing, separation. It's a dissolving of relationship with the land. And so have you seen in your lifetime, and as you connect people with land and you connect deeper with land, I know it's a difficult topic to speak to, but how have you seen yourself change in the way in which you relate to reality through the intentional deepening of relationship with the more than human world and a particular locale?
Yes, it's it's a very slow process. Can be painful, and I think it's quite difficult to erase thousands of years of colonization of the mind and our ways of being into the world, of this ethnocentric, human-centric view of the world and relating to the world. Um, Very often, at the base of it, first is like, in native traditions, nobody owned the land. Like there's no concept of ownership of land. This is like something that sounds really crazy to any native people. It's a shared relation. It's a shared resources, maybe if you want, but we're in partnership with it and nobody owns it. So even me saying I'm a land caretaker or I take care of that land, I already defined it within the frame of my colonial mind. Right. But for sure, I think first, when we say land, we're talking about thousands of relationships. It's not one land. There is the soil, and within a spoon of soil, right, there is more bacteria and microorganisms than people on the planet. 1 teaspoon.
Yeah.
Are we talking about billions of individuals in there? And then you have the trees and the birds and the insects and the animals and the waters, and the fire. And there are so many things to be in relationship with. It's a vast universe. The land is a reflection of the microcosm there is reflected down there. So the diversity is so big. So I'll shift my relationship to soil. My relationship to water has shifted. My relationship to trees have shifted. My relationship to the birds is shifting. There are so many aspects of it that are in that relation, right? And I think that's more and more reminding me that I'm just one little dot on this spider web, one knot with millions of knots. And then I can do a little bit of weaving there, but I'm weaved into them. Anybody that grow food, that is a farmer or land caretakers, know that pretty much nothing is under our control. We don't control the weather patterns. We don't really control what's going to happen to that seed, right? It's all under the control of universal laws. Everything's extremely, controlled by laws, but not by human laws. Cosmic laws, the laws of the water, the laws of physics and biology. And those, you can't really bend them. Every time humans try to bend the ancient laws, the ancient instructions, as we call them, we get kicked out of the system because we are not under the system of laws of the universe, right? There is a lot of, like, nothing is not under a law, under a control, under a certain thing. And people hate to hear that because everybody talks about freedom and I want to be able to do this and that. But there is no freedom within a system that we are bound to, that we are connected to. It's an idea that we just want to do it, but what's the cost of trying to break those laws? Yeah, you might want to be able to travel all the time. What's the cost of that? You might be able to do this and that, but what's the cost? And ultimately, because those are universal laws that cannot be broken, the laws will win. Unless we are weaved into relation and we deeply listen and try to mirror ourselves and try to fit into those laws and return to the ancient instructions. If we don't do that, we're going to get, ejected, right? It's just that it just cannot work that way. So my relationship to land is mainly, okay, how more deeply can I listen, right? If something doesn't grow or something didn't go as planned, is it because I didn't intervene as much as I should have? Or is it because I was in the way of it? Is it because what I did, in fact, prevented it from unfolding? So it's more and more stepping back while going deeper and deeper within. So it's this kind of dance, right? And that's an interesting one to ponder, to be with. right?
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, fascinating. I'm wondering how, when you're looking at this idea of ancient wisdom,
Uh-huh.
how do you discern what is timeless and universally applicable versus what may be culturally and temporally specific
Mm.
or outdated?
Well, there is let's say, a set of instructions. When I say set, that's, big set, that are carried into the fabric of the universe,
Mm,
into the waters, into the fire, into the wind, into the earth, into every element of nature, was born out of that set of instruction in the way it needs to relate, in why it is there. There's always this connection to a service to the greater collective. It always fascinates me that an earthworm or a bee or a flower completely understand why it's there, is way wiser than the humans. I've never disconnected from the service to the collective. And we humans that believe ourselves to be the most intelligent species cannot even figure that out. But the earthworm does. Or the jellyfish, right, that has no brain and that has been here for 350 million years, still
mm,
roaming the ocean,
mhm.
going through cataclysmic changing, ice age, and meteorite falling on the earth, and somehow that being with no brain, still there,
Yeah,
still thriving.
yeah, and living a peaceful, beautiful life.
Yes, not looking, to know if this is the biggest whale and try to kill it to find that out, right? It's just living in good relation to the world, right? And literally every part of nature that you can think of, it's a tree, a plant, a stone, a river, an animal, they all abiding to those laws in instruction and following them and alignment with them. And we are the only one, which is kind of interesting, out of millions of species of animal only, to have diverted from it. And then trying to curve and bind nature to our will. Say, no, no, this way is the way, right? That's the way we need to do things, because
Mm,
that's better for us, thinking that the earth exists outside of this, right? So we can bend somehow our own destiny without the destiny of the others. So this set of rules, because it is dwelling everywhere, is available to everyone.
mm,
The question is, do I take time to listen to that? How do I do that? Can I spend more time in ways that allows me to listen more and see what I could do? Right?
mm,
The Western mind, when it wants to know, engages the mind, try to resolve through equation, to prove things, to dissect things, to separate. The more indigenous way of thinking is that when we want to know, we go back to not knowing, we go back to silence, we go back to listening. We silence the mind, we do the opposite, and we sit
mhm,
in our bodies. We sit in a relation, in observation, right? Instead of accelerating, we slow down. It's a
mm,
complete 180 degrees way to relate to knowledge and therefore to wisdom, right?
mm,
So there is possibility for each and every one of us to access that, because it's reflected. Yeah, you can just go outside on your driveway and look at this little plant that is cracking through uh, the driveway rocks, and
mm,
literally sit with that. You don't have to be, in the wide forest, in the jungle to do that. You can literally do it with anything. The stars at night, any birds that's coming, but always sitting in the south, as we say, in the seat of the student.
mm,
You have to be able to sit from the place that I'm not the master, I'm not above you, I'm a baby, I'm a young child on this earth, and therefore I don't know much. Teach me,
mm,
teach me. You can't learn if you don't put yourself in the position of a student. If you're already in the position of the master of it, and the one that controls and the one that knows, there's very little you can know, very little you will really understand.
Yeah. So it's this, it sounds like humility and a humbling of oneself is a central aspect or quality of discerning what is relevant and important today, as we learn, relearn, remember ancient modalities, wisdom, and traditions and practices.
Yeah, it's a child mind. That's curiosity, right? Constantly curious. Like there's always a mystery there.
Yeah.
That includes for me when I look in the mirror, when I look at you, and when I look at the stars, right? It's always there. You know, I've been keeping bees for, I don't know, 10, 15 years now. There's so much I still don't understand. And
Yeah.
I will, that they do understand. And then we've researched the bees and we understand their dance and how they hibernate and how they go for food. And we have dissect the bees and that, but we don't really fully understand the hive mind and what's happening in the hive to a degree than they do.
Yeah.
And I will never fully get to that. But I can aim to make them my teacher. I can say, okay, teach me. I'm going to sit. I'm not going to read books. I'm not going to dissect you. I'm going to observe. I'm going to spend more time looking like I've never seen a bee before every time I see one. And I'm going to see new things, right? Because I'm curious in that. But if I've already resolved and answered, the question are going to be very limited.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you ever read The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk?
No, I didn't.
No?
No.
I highly recommend it, brother.
Yes.
It's an incredible novel. And one of the main characters, Madrone, she comes into communion with the spirit of the bee. And the bee spirit completely transforms her perception of reality and her ability to see and to navigate and to touch in with dimensions of magic of reality that are incredible. And I just thought of it when you were talking there about the bees. I really recommend that book for many reasons, but that being one of them. And I'm glad you brought up the bees, because I saw that you've been beekeeping on your website, and I wanted to ask you, like, what's one of the main or most potent, powerful teachings, understandings that you have cultivated over, you said 15 years of beekeeping? Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's the power of union, of unity. Right? And it's the, you know, in the Andean cosmology, in my tradition, there's a prayer in the north direction, the wind, the direction of the wind. It's a teaching that is carried by the wind and by the deer spirit. And I mean, it's a long, complex topic, but to resume it in a simple way here for the purpose of the discussion, it says that the wind carry the prayer of unity. And what's the shadow of that prayer? Because when you bring a prayer, there's always a shadow prayer coming with it. If you bring the light, there's a shadow. So that cosmology always give you the other teacher, not the shadow as wrong, but what happened when that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And what's in the way of that is ego. That's the shadow of the prayer. The opposite of unity is ego. It's a sense of separation, right? So that prayer basically says, there are no others. It's an illusion. And life is not about me, it's about the others. So it's say two things that the mind cannot put together, because it's say first there is no others. And then you say, yes, in fact, it's not about you, it's about the others. It says there is others, right? So it's, all the prayers in Andean cosmology are framed in a way that the mind cannot sit with them. It disrupts it. It's not possible to say, Well, it's not black, but in fact, it is black, right?
Yeah.
And only the heart can dwell with opposites. I
Yeah.
can be really happy right now and also grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I can carry pain and carry joy in the same breath. I can be really amazed. This morning was so beautiful. First day of sun after 5 days of rain. I went on the land. It was just so much beauty. And at the same time, there is pain in my heart, feeling what's going on in the world. Okay? So I can feel that, right? My teacher say, yeah, you can plant a seed and at the same time pray for the collapse of the empire.
Yeah.
So what it means that you can plant things to create life, new life, and you can also pray at the same time for death. Right? So the mind and the body are able to be in contradictions, to live with the opposites.
Yeah.
So that prayer of unity, that's very ancient prayer that is carried by the Deers, and there are many stories about that and creation story around that. But the bees carry that too. Right? On a certain level of consciousness, there are no individual bees. There's only a hive. Meaning that if you take one bee out, there is no survival. It's like literally nothing. And the bees in itself cannot carry the task of the hive. They need all of them. On another level of consciousness, there is an individual bee that wake up in the morning and that goes at a certain task based on her age, that is very dedicated to things that is in relation to the others. So the bees live in that duality. This life is not about mine, it's about the others. Service to the collective, service to the hive. And by the way, you can expand that service to the flowers and the plant, service to the ecosystem. They're not already serving the hive, they are serving the plants, which are serving the bees, right? You can see that Aini, that sacred reciprocity, we call it in Indian language there. And at the same time, this life is not about me, it's about the others. So there are no others, there are others, and I'm dwelling in the middle of that. Right? And the bees perfect that. They've perfected it for millions of years. And they have understood that. But the plants have understood that, right? But the bees, they give us that. I've done many ceremonies just sitting in front of my hive all day and being in prayer and connecting to the queen bee and the sacred geometry beings. There's a lot of sacred geometry beings that inform the hive on how to design it, and the queen bee is also connected to that. And then there is connection to certain star systems. There's connection to other civilization. When we look at the beehive, we see, oh, it's just a little insect, right? And they're doing that together. But when you sit with it for extended period of time, any beekeepers knows that there are connection to other things that are in the unseen and that are very clear. Then to know, that's why they can do those honeycomb that are really perfect in complete darkness. Hive is completely dark. Bees they don't see in the dark, but somehow they're able to build those amazingly perfect structures, right? How do they do that? How do they know that one shape? They didn't go to school, right? They're tapping into ancient instruction. They're tapping into their wisdom, right? And they're doing that beyond the self in service of the next generation of bees. Bees live only 1 month, a very short life. So really what they do is not for them anyway. The bees can teach us so much about that, right? And at the same time, because they live in a system which is also the earth we have crafted, terraformed, and changed, they're also suffering from the system they are in because they are not disconnected from it. So however perfect they are, if they are in a system that is broken, they are going to suffer too. And we see that too, right? So it's a reminder of our responsibility as humans towards all the species. That include the bees, obviously, but all of them.
Right? Wow. So much in that too. Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting to consider how it seems like if you're to have a real authentic dare I say, truthful prayer that you're carrying for life, that is life-centric in nature, then there has to be an equal balancing of carrying a prayer for death, which means that there must be an honoring of both the seen and unseen within that. And it also makes me think about how difficult it is to not only carry those prayers in a real good way and to live them and embody them, but to live them and embody them in the human experience, where we are consistently being invited to reconcile what you're speaking to, which is this prayer for the self, commitment to growing the self, and then also holding a prayer of commitment to giving life to the collective. And especially in modern times, where there's so many layers of this kind of cult of individualism steeped in our cultural mythology, it feels like a mythological challenge to reconcile these parts of us, the collective and the individual, the self and the other.
Yes, I guess until you start understanding that there is no such thing as a self as you call it.
Yes.
I am a mycelium mystic connection to all there is, right? What I call the self, it's my parents, my ancestors, my land, because guess what? This piece of my skin is the food I've eaten. So we have a very narrow view of the self. I think it's that thing that we have that somehow we are so important, and I need to do healing for the self, and my healing is about me, right? And once we can detach from that and understand that there is no such thing as a self from certain level of consciousness we can access to, that the only reason I'm alive is breathing the oxygen from the trees and the ocean right now.
Yeah.
So my idea of the separate self, that's what I mean, right? That somehow I can individualize and define who Angell is, who Tay is, who everyone is not real. So once I can see that and transcend that, not saying that my body doesn't exist, but when I say my body, what do I mean? The millions of bacteria, billions of bacteria in my digestive tract that I carry. In fact, there is more bacteria in me than cells in my body. So what do I call the self?
Yeah.
The decaying digestive system is probably closer to the aliveness of the rest of the body. There are more cells. In numbers, I'm not this. I am my digestive system right now, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to kind of, explore what we call the self. And then I think it turns into one of the big problematic of today's world, especially in healing circle and that, which is we always go for the self. We always go for me, right? And I see that all the time, right? If we do an event or an offering or retreat and it's about healing something specific for you, people are really interested. But if we do an event that says, okay, let's come chop woods and carry water and take care of the land, nobody's interested. People thinking that somehow that's not what they need. And that's the depths of the disconnection, right? We don't understand that caring for the land all day will heal the self much more than my centered, constant desire for healing. They need to be weaved together. I'm not saying one should be there and not the others, but we went so much into an individualistic perspective of the world. And that goes for spiritual and non-spiritual people, by the way, we're the same. Such detachment from it that we need to rebalance by act of giving and service. And in fact, my experience is that people that do more of that heal faster than the others. And there is a big teaching in that. the land is calling back, right? And we need to go beyond also just praying for the land or praying for the earth. In Indian cosmology, prayers is action mainly. The way you pray for the land is you garden and you become a farmer. You plant seeds. That's the people that are the most important, right? It's not singing to the land. I'm not saying don't sing for the land, but the primary prayer is an act of service. So yeah, it's great to go sing to a river, but it's more important maybe spending the day cleaning up the river and picking up the trash. That's from a native perspective and an indigenous perspective, that's more spiritual. And there's a lot I could say about that, right? But we somehow, because we're disconnected from the land and we're all about upper world and channels and angels and star beings and all that, we have really lost track of what matters. And that comes back a little bit to what we're saying at the beginning. The more human you are, the more divine you are. But we somehow don't want that human experience because I guess it's painful. Because I guess it's messy, it's complicated, it's unresolved. And so we want the clarity of the stars and the clarity of that channeling, right? But you'll never hear a native person, elders, saying, I channeled that and here I'm sharing it on the internet. Or I'm working with zoo star beings and that. And trust me, they work in much more depth than anyone I've met. But they don't share about it, right? It's their secret, it's their sacred space. What matters to them is what they're doing about it in their community. What they're doing about it to protect the waters, to protect the land, to care for the most vulnerable people on earth. So their prayer is very clear and can seem very simple, but it's very embodied and present with the world as it is in this moment. There's not like even the prophecy where everybody talks about it, we're the one we've been waiting for and this and that. Prophecies unfold over thousands of years. Yes, we are in a prophecy, but we're not going to see the end of it. And maybe it's going to be, in year 3000. We've always been the one we've been waiting for. Not just today. We were 1,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago, and we will be in 5,000 years. Those prophecies are long, long stories. But if we have a sense of self and kind of savior and, whatever messiah type of like spiritual community, we think we're the one. But then we forget that we need to tend to the wound. And right now, people are being killed and suffering, and people are being excluded, and based on their race and their religion and their color of skin and their sexual preference. A native community knows how to tend to that. And that's what we need to return to, tending the land, tending the bodies that are here now, not escaping for escaping. My elder never share. I mean, literally, I'm thinking of the 3 elders I work with. They're channeling to the public, their ceremonies to the public, but they are deeply involved in soup kitchen and land caring and taking care of elderly and the children, and they are very involved in that, and that's the way they're showing us how to walk this prayer.
Wow. Yeah. It makes me think about how so many of us have at least lost our sense, and I would go so far as to say lost some real aspects of our roots, right? I mean, very simply and obviously, that we live in this colonial world, that the entire earth essentially has been colonized in this drastic way, that people have, through that process, lost this sense, at least, like I'm saying, of a connection to place, to land, to the kin of their surroundings. And so then I can understand from that perspective why so much of New Age spiritualism is caught up here, you know, like you're saying, up in the realms of the sky, the angels, that there's this need to root down. But I can see how it's just inherently difficult, or to even see or feel or know what that really is to root down, because the roots have been taken from us in many ways.
Yeah, there is fear, there is pain there is deep healing there. You know, one of the reason the deer is in the north in that cosmology and connect us to this realm is that the deer has 4 legs and 2 antlers. It reminds us that we need 2 times more work to connect to the ground than up there. It doesn't have 6 or 8 antlers, right? It only has 2 with many points, but 2. But he has always 4 feet on the ground. So the primary teaching, just by observing a deer, is grounding. He's tending to the land, right? And then he listens to the sky, and he has antennas. He connects. And as he ages, every year he shed that knowledge. He loses antlers and restart with 1 more point. So the elder here is telling us, forget everything, lose your connection, stay grounded, and then regrow a bit more points, right?
Yeah.
But still by shedding every year, right? There's a beautiful teaching in that, why this animal is there. Yeah.
I love that.
But there is no, all those teachings come from civilizations and people that were connected to the land 24/7. They were all farmers. My teacher in the Andes, is a farmer. He grows corns and beans and other things. He's a beekeeper. He makes essential oil and things with plants. And yes, once in a while, he does a ceremony, right? He does offerings in other ways. But I would say 90% of his life is earth-centered. And he's someone that can just go on a sacred site and makes things quite magical happen in front of your eyes without anything but his presence and his song, right? Like I've seen pretty things that were like, wow, without any plans, without anything, just certain prayers. But really, he doesn't really talk about it. For him, it's just part of what comes out of very deep roots, very deep grounding. And the sad part is that we are all wired that way because we evolve as hunter-gatherers and then farmers and then people always connected to land for most of our evolution. And here we are very lost as civilization. I think we can agree on that as a collective. And yet we are not taking those radical steps. I always tell one of the things we start with our students in our year class is by planting a seed and observing it for months. Tending to one seed. And you get so many teachings from that, more than I could teach about earth prayers and connection and ceremonies that you would get praying all day to the earth. You will get more by planting one seed and observing it. It's right there, right? In all of us. I believe that. I know that. That's how we are wired. That's how we evolve. And it's waiting to be awakened. But we need to take the difficult step to return, to change the lifestyle, to be in community in a different way. And that's somehow difficult, right? That's somehow painful. We're afraid of it, I guess, in some ways. Many people are afraid of taking that step back into the self, not back in time. But that's our liberation of the collective will happen. Once we own our land, and there's only one land, and it's sacred all over the world. It's not like this land and this land is just one. And that's the most sacred thing. That's the mother. It's the end of wars. It's the end of, taking from other countries resources and that. There's a very different way to relate to each other as a shared community, right?
Yeah.
The bees knows how to do it. The animals know how to do it. Everybody knows how to do it.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure what is the next technology we can invent to somehow solve our problem. We don't need a new piece of technology.
Yeah.
We don't need any of that. You know?
Yeah. The most integrated and clear that I've ever felt in my life is when I've spent days or weeks out in the wilderness. And especially if I was by myself. And I do counsel work with people for various different reasons. People come to me for support, therapeutic conversations. And something that I'm consistently being drawn to invite my clients to engage in is the very simple, taking time for very simple relationship tending to some wild space around them. And I do like to invite them to go to wild waters often and to just sit with the water and to just listen. And if something needs to be spoken, to speak, but to mostly listen and to open oneself up to being moved by the natural flows of that moment, whatever sensation and feeling and meaning is arising naturally through the emptying, through the creating of space within the self. Because I notice when we're in our conversations, in our sessions, that there is this hyper focus on themselves as an individual, that there's this like gritty, intense grasping or holding of the self and wringing out of the self in order to figure it out. How do I get better? How do I feel better? How do I feel more integrated and whole? And the conversations can help, for sure, they do. And I always come back to the understanding of like, it's only going to help so much. So please turn to the waters, turn to the forest, turn to the plants. They're going to naturally draw out those qualities that are keeping you imbalanced, so that you can find a real sense of balance within yourself, which it's that sense of balance that allows the authentic self, the true self, which is inherently ecological, relational, interbeing, to arise.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, I think, the healing of the self very often is extremely violent act.
Yeah.
It's very, and it doesn't matter if it's a Western type of healing or the spiritual one, but it's sometimes we're quite violent towards ourselves for change.
Yeah.
We really, even if we do it with sometimes beautiful way, but there is something about it that basically is about correcting the self and changing the self. So there's some kind of level of violence towards what is, to change it, shift it, release it. But once you do turn the healing towards the collective, now it becomes inclusive, and that's not violence anymore. It's liberation. It's liberation of the community, liberation of the world. Once it's inclusive of all, it cannot be violent because there's no power dynamic. If it stay as a self-healing that's excluding the rest, it's going to be violent because excluding is violent. Cutting ties, removing what we're connected to is by definition violent. So very often the simple act to turns towards service in that way of healing reclaim the lost part of the self, which are not just lost for us, but lost for the collective. And as we gather them together, we heal in a way that is way more profound than any other way I've ever seen. Right?
Well, we're coming near the end of this, and I want to bring up a topic that's a bit of a shift, but it feels exciting to me. So I'd like to know about how in your In your exploration of Andean cosmology, as well as Norse shamanism, what parallels or synergies have you discovered between these seemingly distinct traditions? And how do they inform your personal orientation to life and to the kind of service that you offer to the world, to your community?
Well, they are quite different in many ways. The medicine wheel and the view of the different world, and I would say the gods or the sacred archetypes that you work with are quite different in many ways. But they're all leading to the same place.
Right.
They're all probably coming from the same place, and they're all leading to the same place. The language might seem very different, right? And it's a bit like taking a glass of water, and if I say it in French or in Spanish or in English, it's like 3 different words, but it's still water. Right? So they all aim to understand our place in the cosmos, in the world that we are in, to find that meaning and purpose on how to walk a good life, to be in good relation during our life, and to heal our soul in that process, right? And so the Celtic ways, I would say, or the North ways with the runes and all of that, is a bit more I guess the gods are a little bit more human in some ways. They make mistakes, and they can be quite violent, and they're sometimes quite confused, and they're not like the perfect gods. They do quite horrific things even sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So that cosmology, I like it, because sometimes, the imperfect gods is a good way to find yourself, to find the sacred in the imperfect parts of you.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can relate.
Yeah.
The God in the sky that is perfect, or the angels, it's not who we are really. And so I like the Norse Celtic mythology and those myths, because I think when you hear those myths and those stories, you see yourself in the heroes or the villain, right? Part of you is in the villain, part of you is in the heroes. So very often, I was talking with a student about it. I say, very often what we're looking anyway is belonging. We're looking to belong in this world, to belong with each other, to belong in our bodies. And those myths provide you a way to belong. So even if you're very isolated and you have no friend, and you read one of those beautiful myths, and in that story, the heroes, the heroine, the gods look like you a little bit, or did something that looks a bit like your life. In a story that is thousands of years old, you finally belong. You're in a story. You're in a bigger story. You're in a myth. And it makes you feel back into place, right? Okay, I'm connected to this. There's a connection, right? So I really like the ancient myth because of that, the stories because of that. The Andean cosmology, in the same way as many native stories, as the stories the same, with the tricksters and the people and the land and the upheaval and the big changes, and but they just craft it in a slightly different way. For me, I like Andean cosmology. That's mainly my practice now, because it allows me to go to any part of the world, meaning any trees, any plants, any animals, any person, any part of me, and have a GPS, a correct map on how to navigate that. So it's a system that gives us, however dark it is, however confused you are, whatever type of pain you are experiencing, here's where you are on the map, and here is the GPS to navigate through that. Because they bring the elements of the self in it: gratitude and anger, clarity and confusion, unity and ego, love and forgetting, the teachings, the center and the heart, and the different animals. They are this beautiful map that you can use literally in today's world, in this modern world. And I think they are very potent because of that, and that's why people, study it, because we need a map. We need a new story. We need a new dream, right? Very often my teachers say, the problem is not that we don't know what to do, is that we have forgotten how to dream. Like humanity today, dream is a nightmare. We need a new dream, because dreams is the place where everything is born. You can think of the most beautiful sacred site in the world, or even, I don't know, this computer. Someone dreamed of that one day. He had this crazy idea, right? And now it's manifested. So in Andean cosmology, everything was a dream, whether was in that part of the subconscious. It's a specific world, right? It's called Ukupacha. It's a place where before things happened. And that's where the world is created from. Your phone, your t-shirts, literally everything you made in your life was first that dream. And I like this cosmology because it allows us to shift the dream, to shift the perception, and to start manifesting something different. And they are really potent for that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to ask you one last question today. And I'm wondering what wild heart revival means to you.
Wild heart revival. I feel it's touching. First, I think wild and heart is kind of redundant. The heart is wild. And probably a wider heart is a heart that's been broken and shattered and healed. And, it's not a perfect love stream. It's more complex. It's our capacity, and it's very connected to what we started with, to capacity to be human. The question is not really how to fix the world, is how am I going to love that world? How I'm going to be in that world? Because it might stay painful. Probably it's going to be painful for a while, right? Beyond my life.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you still love the world? How do you still be engaged in the world? How do we love? And, that's very difficult, and sometimes it seems impossible. How do I love certain things in the world that are really painful to me? So my teacher always say, you don't have to like everyone or everybody, but you have to love them. So to me, that's the wild heart. It's my capacity to indeed have boundary and clear compass for wisdom and what I find acceptable or not. And there is things in the world that I don't find acceptable and are not okay. And I can say clear no. And I might not like that person in that moment, but I need to love them. I need to find where their pain is. I need to find where the suffering is, because someone that creates suffering is in suffering. So can I go beyond just the facade of the angry toddler that's like a 5-year-old having a tantrum, but he's a political leader, right? I won't give any names. Anybody put the name they want there. And say, I really don't like what this person is saying or doing, but can I love the wounded child there? Can I love the help find, where is the pain? What is the pain? And love that part of the world, love that part of this person. And I can only do that if I can do it for myself. As long as there's part of me that I want to heal, that I'm fighting, that I'm not okay with, I'm not going to be okay with anything in the world. And that's what we're here, right? To find those places in us that we're ashamed of, that we're hiding from, that we found really not acceptable, and find love there, right? And find that kind of love.
Yeah, well said. A prayer that I've been carrying lately, it feels really meaningful to me, and that I feel comfortable sharing with you all, is that I'm asking myself, it's a question, I'm asking myself, can I touch with love whatever I have closed my heart to.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you for being here today, brother. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Same.
Incredibly nourishing for me, and I'm sure it will be for whoever tunes into this.
Mm.
I wonder if you have anything you want to share with the audience to direct them towards, anything specific that feels important to share this time.
I mean, people can always look at, what I do and our website and our offerings, but I think one of the message, instead of selling something to people, I'm going to sell you an ID or a prayer. Make sure you are gentler with yourself. For me, the foundation of this work is to be more gentle with the self. So look at the place where you're not that kind to yourself and when you can soften a little bit. Because I think if you can do that, that's warrior work. That's not easy, but I think that opens the door of the mysterious and the mystical healing, what we call grace, miracles. They come from that place where we can, in the place we have hardened, we just soften it towards the self and just something else take over that is not really our doing, right? That's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.